Mirza Shahnawaz Agha is an entrepreneur, author, and public intellectual with keen interests in law, economic development, and political affairs. An expert on Islamic jurisprudence, he envisions a comprehensive agenda of economic and political reforms in the Muslim world. He is based in Karachi, Pakistan.
Assalamu alaikum, Agha Sahab. In your book, you've introduced the notion of economic revival through urbanization of a vertical kind, vertical urbanization. And that is consequently to foster and create a Pakistani market, which is based on certain principles of fiscal decentralization, which paves way for fiscal empowerment. So can you please shed light on what the concept of fiscal decentralization exclusive to your policy is? Because according to the present constitution of Pakistan, a clause 140A, it already transfers, decentralizes things from the center and trickles it down to the very constituencies. So how is your reform different from what's already in place?
The Constitution of Pakistan, to begin with, in itself presents a major dichotomy between reality and what is there already prescribed in the articles of the Constitution. So we'll keep the Constitution out of this particular answer. Now, insofar as the urbanization model is concerned, I've looked at various possibilities and into what the country has. So you have natural resources and you have human resources in this country. You have a territory. But the natural resources are not being used for the benefit of the human resource that inhabit the country. Then you have had laws in the country which have come down for the last 7 decades, which have been extremely oppressive, or they have been alien. The processes, the laws, the fiscal laws particularly, they have been at the dictates of donors. The donor organizations are very well known to you, whether it is the IMF or it is the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank or the EBRD, IBRD, and so on and so forth. Nobody hands out money without preconditions. And those preconditions, without any particular thought, have been implemented, promulgated as laws, and forced onto the people. Now, the criminality of the entire exercise has been the lack of research, and therefore 2.6 million people in this country who constitute to be the bureaucracy of the country are ruling 220 million people who are the citizens of this country without their actual and tangible consent. So when you talk of decentralization, fiscal decentralization, you use your basic assets, your land, your people, and you empower them through a corporate model of urbanization, i.e. you create municipal cities, and these municipal cities get quoted on the stock exchange. And then these municipal cities become borrowers and debt servicers. And they all, in their individual rights, have a unique selling point. They are now like a product. So the hegemony of a bureaucracy in this country, comprising 4 institutions, the judiciary, the army, the civil bureaucracy, and the parliaments, ceases to exist. because right now the money comes to them and they are spending 82% on themselves, i.e. 2.6 million are consumers of 82% of your budget, and 220 million people are left with 18%, again being managed by the same bureaucracy and in a manner which has been clandestine to say the least. So if this satisfies your question, or you want to know more, please.
Just one more point adding to it. How do we tangibly realize this? The whole question was revolving around that we do have laws to an extent, whether dichotomous, but there are certain laws that do guarantee certain freedoms also. But we see a gap in their implementations. The whole point of taking it away from the bureaucracies and their blackmails, as also mentioned, how is this mobilizable, is the question. How do we do that?
Well, the entire exercise which we are indulging in right now is to bring to the table a certain idea. All right? So what we are in essence trying to discuss here is the invocability of a certain thought, certain proposition. There are several ways to turn around a nation state. To begin with, let me clear another aspect of law, and that is that Islam does not recognize, does not subscribe to the nation state model, which is something engineered in Europe, because Europe is an extremely polarized, socially polarized area, and was implemented all over the world. Islam, on the other hand, had the concept of ummah, where you had a melting pot of wisdom coming from Algeria, coming from Morocco, coming from Egypt, coming from India, coming from all over the world. And they were supposed to be considered as equal. So, when this was happening, in essence, before we were cut into political territories and made nation states, we saw that the maximum amount of inventions, maximum amount of strength came from the Muslim world. We have unfortunately lost this. But if we create a product, i.e. through urbanization, then what we have on our hands right now is an ability to be able to sow the seeds for a sort of a renaissance of the old concept of the Ummah. In Pakistan, for instance, which is a good ground for having urbanization, you contain the population into ethnic, parochial territories comprising of not more than 60,000 people to manage their own affairs. And they will come up, because once you trigger the generator of human thought, they come up with their own sources of income, and they become the innovative generator for new ways of life and economics and social discipline. So when you talk about how are we going to implement it, the implementation comes from destroying a certain model and invoking a fresh one. The fresh model has to have merit, A. B has to have broad-based consensus. I mean, I can say that, all right, all of us sitting around this table will not smoke. And if I am downvoted, then I'm downvoted. And if we all agree to it, then we all probably go ahead and smoke. So the development of consensus is fundamental. Now, in urbanization, I have not used any particular doctrine which lends support to the nation-state concept propagated by the West, propagated by the Europeans. And therefore, nation-states will create, the urbanization units of the municipal companies will create mini models of population management, and they will have to be independent from the fiscal perspective. If this serves well for the people, the 60,000 people, the 60,000 people in their neighborhood would also like to copy it. And then it becomes, like they say in army terminology, sympathy detonation. I mean, one thing catches on and it moves. This particular product of a municipal company and its shares and its profitability, its balance sheet, becomes a sellable commodity in the international market for investment. That is how I intend to propagate it. That's how I intend to market it. And that is precisely why we are having these sessions, so that the idea, when viewed by the cross-section of intellect, i.e. economists, i.e. accountants, actuaries, they will be able to pinpoint the merits, and once the merit is established, then in consonance with what the Quran says, the deliverance of a message followed by blood, you will have a very, very desirable model which people may want to replicate. And then invoking it becomes a walk in the park, because irrespective of a resistive 2.6 million in the bureaucracy defending a status quo, you will have 220 million people seeking a change.
Since developing a consensus is fundamental to this movement, and we have seen that even in 1947, when Pakistan was formulated, Quaid-e-Azam was of the opinion that we should have a different financial mechanism, which was evident in his speech of State Bank, in which he also inaugurated a committee that was to present to the world a different financial model that could exhibit what the Muslim intelligentsia perceived of what the financial situation should be. However, because of XYZ reasons, we weren't able to implement it completely. Similarly, people for the present government, the youngsters, etc., they also had this consensus that we wanted change, but they went for a government in whatever manners. In order to build that consensus, what would you say and propose to people in order to make them believe that the aftershocks or the transitionary period will not be so heavy that they should resist this change?
You've quoted Quaid-e-Azam. It is true that in his speech addressing the State Bank of Pakistan, he did want another model. However, the reality at that particular point in time, and we are talking of 1947, the nation-state concept was already a thing which was being implemented around the globe. Empires were falling, nation-states were being created. So for the nation-states, the announced policy was that you need to have territory, you need to have a population, you need to have a government, and you are a nation-state. The hidden agenda was debt. Today, if we have the concept of a reserve currency for trading, if we have a concept for assessing the value mechanism for assets, we will fail, because the world order seeks essentially for every nation state to have debt. I do not know what exactly Quaid-e-Azam had in his mind, but he was certainly aware to have made this comment, the factor of debt. In the case of Pakistan, we are rich insofar as natural resources are concerned. We are rich insofar as human resources are concerned. We do not need debt. But to push away debt as the hidden essential for remaining a nation state, the people who came into power after Quaid-e-Azam and who still remain in power to date have not been able to offload this burden. Successive governments that have come into office, including the current one, have first run to donors. Had they gone towards assetization of their own resources, human and natural resources, the element of debt would have been out of the window. But somehow, power in the country, political power for governance, has been based or has been linked to the donors, and therefore we have had very alienated leadership. And for development of a country or development of a nation state, unless we are looking inwards, I don't see a hope. So a change is absolutely incumbent, necessary, and now.
Sir, from my limited research and understanding of the economic paradigm, in a span of 25 years, the rate or the acceleration of urbanization has been as sluggish as 25%. Can you chalk this up to the subservience of political, religious reforms to political reforms, I would say?
You see, if you look at the statistical data of the government of Pakistan, they claim that we are urbanized up to 35.5%, and of recently as 2018, they claim that we are urbanized up to 36%. This is nonsense. We are not urbanized at all, because if vertical facilities in any urban area, i.e. sewerage, i.e. the availability of water, i.e. uninterrupted power supply, i.e. durable housing, are absent, then you're not urbanized. You are part of a jungle which has grown on its own. The aspects of religious domination, the aspects of political domination are attributed to feudalism. Feudals in history have relied on edicts, religious edicts. So between the two, although they seem and they meet the eye as opposing poles, they have been pseudo partners. So you can go to certain cities and certain population areas of Pakistan, you will see that a cleric is the almighty power lord out there. And yet in another, you'll find a politician, a big landowner, like what we refer to as a Vadera or a Malik or a Chaudhary or a Sardar, in total power. So when you're talking of democracy here or you're talking of adult franchise here, it is again nonsensical, because these are captive political constituencies. And in a state where you have political constituencies that are captive, that are already, under siege, then to have any hopes attached to politically reforming the country or to religiously reforming the country is wishful thinking. So the structure has to be first destroyed, and it cannot be destroyed by militancy. It cannot be destroyed with the barrel of a gun. It is always destroyed by a presentation of something better. I bought a suit, hypothetically, a year ago. Today, I go to the market and I see that, all right, if I need a day suit and here is a fabric which is being just created, which gives me the same thing but is better, I will prefer that change. The people are ignorant about the alternatives. When you want to say, I've heard this so many times, let's get rid of Imran Khan, for instance. Okay, he's the Prime Minister right now. Get rid of him. I've heard this in the time of Nawaz Sharif, let's get rid of him. Let's get rid of Benazir Bhutto. And in tandem, you hear the same comment. What are our choices? If we kick him out, do we get Nawaz Sharif in again? When Nawaz Sharif and Benazir were contending, do we kick Nawaz Sharif out and get Benazir in? But that's not the issue. The personality-based politics is a death knell. We have nothing to do with these personalities. They are not prophets of God. We need plans. Plans that make sense to 220 million people, not to 2.6 million bureaucrats. So that's my response to you.
Popularized economists like Ivan Turok have basically come up with the idea that urbanization alone cannot induce economic growth, but rather a conducive economic infrastructure and institutional system. My question to you would be that do you think that urbanization can be counterproductive if it outpaces our economic infrastructure?
I will not make a comment on the economist you have just quoted. I will remain focused on my views on urbanization. Urbanization, as is generally present on the internet or in books, really means that you take people away from rural areas and put them into urban areas. We are not talking of that particular form of urbanization. What I'm talking of urbanization here is the creation of a product which has economic dimensions, i.e., that you create municipal cities. When you create a municipal city and you convert it or you present it as a product, then what you are saying basically is that you have in the periphery industries that will feed that particular product on the one hand, and that product will have a factor of production, i.e. through taxes or through the people who are living there. So there is an inflow and there is an outflow. So you are essentially looking at a product. You see, in the nation-state model, two things have been significant, and that is available for you to examine in history books. Sociological reforms, economic reforms. Sociologically, we are extremely diversified in Pakistan. Economically, we are alienated, we are under dictates. We don't have an indigenous plan of our own. I mean, therefore, if you want to go to the beginning of this thought, the first and foremost thing which was necessary in this nation state was land utilization for social objectives. That means all land, like they did in India, for instance, they finished all the Rajas out there, and the principalities being held by Nawabs, and they nationalized all land. We need nationalization of land here. Point one, and that is for social reformation. That means the government of Pakistan, or one institution under the government of Pakistan, becomes the landowner of the entire territory of about, what is it, 796,096 square kilometers. They become lessors. Everybody else becomes lessees, whether they are individuals or they are institutions. And if you will walk with me on how this will unfold, then you will see that, for instance, land grabbing will come to an end. There is institutional land grabbing here. And then take an example of Karachi port. Take an example of Civil Aviation Authority These are technically professional organizations, PNSC. They're supposed to be focused on the core business of managing a port, or managing an airport, or managing, take railways, it's another example. Instead of doing that, they've taken land. So they have become landlords, and they are getting rent. And there's a lot of land lying with them which is of no utility to them. So the core business, because the money is coming from rents at the cost of us, the people, of the 220 million people, their focus on the core business is absent. Take the army. 12.5% plus land of Pakistan belongs to the army. You don't need that much of land. And if you do, you got to give rent for it, justify it. To support your perks and support your salaries is the job of the federal government. So the whole paradigm will shift from where it is, from that feudal mindset to a proactive, more focused industrial and social activity. So land utilization is one thing which is very important in a nation state, and then the identification of an economic destination. We don't have one. Economic destination is what I have proposed here, urbanization. Create municipal companies, get them quoted on the stock exchange, and then give a free hand to industries to be able to put up industries here to feed those municipal companies. So you have an economic, these are the two things principally that are necessary for the economic turnaround in the country. And this will do away, in my opinion, the rot which we have had to suffer for 7 decades. The rot which we have had to suffer for 7 decades in the hands of being mismanaged. One institution does not collaborate with the other. Then you have legislators here who do not know how to legislate because there is no destination defined. वो legislate किस बात पे करेंगे? I mean, they will be constantly, as you have seen, they are constantly fighting with themselves because they do not have an agenda, a master agenda in front of them that this is where we need to legislate. Hypothetically, what should be your educational curriculum? The curriculum for the madrasas, for instance, was devised under the CIA in Wisconsin University. If you're following now, I mean, is this what an independent country has to do or should be doing? No, because these 2.6 million people are holding 220 million people hostage because they do not wish to rely on themselves, they do not wish to stand up. Bahar se money is coming in from the outside, it takes care of our salaries, takes care of our perks. We really don't care about anything else. Even the political facade we have in this country is an eyewash. I mean, it does not represent the will, the wish, and the ideology of the people in the country.
Sir, my other question would be, in light of the recommendation rhapsodized by you in your book about eliminating equity abuse, how can you single out the principle of Shura, that is Islamic consensus, and inculcate it in our economic policies to obviously fix this degree or the magnitude of equity abuse that we have at hand?
Before I responsibly answer your question, would you like to tell me your understanding of equity?
Ownership of assets,
And
of basically of land, of labor, of enterprise, of, did I mention capital? To encapsulate this, basically.
right. To me, the establishment of equity comes on the basis of an even playing field. When you look at the Constitution of Pakistan and under that the various statutes that support the Constitution of Pakistan, you will see that the predominant lot of statutes and processes are those which were engineered by Lord Macaulay in 1866. Right. The difference between a colonized territory and an independent territory is clear. In a colonized territory, the institutions of the state are rulers, the population are servants. In an independent state, the people are rulers, the institutions are servants. Here, the law is not evenly applicable across the board for the common man and those sitting in the institutions. I'll give you an example. In Pakistan, you still carry a system of GOR, which is Government Officers' Residence. Now, a man who is privileged to be a bureaucrat, he is being given a house and he's living in the GOR. His electricity never goes, his water is insured, his gas is insured, he does not have to queue up to get his children admitted in a school, and all the amenities and facilities that are required or can be made available for his lordship are available. Then that man is expected to govern you, although he is your servant, because he is getting paid from your taxes, to change laws, to change policies for you. He will not do it. He cannot do it because he is enjoying the perks. So you got to back integrate the bureaucracy into civil society. He must feel the pangs of remaining without electricity, running out of buying water, having gas shedding, having to queue up to get his children admitted, having to line up at government hospitals to be able to get treated, and so on and so forth. Or go to the court and get pushed around by clerks, judicial clerks. This was the model which the colonists had so that they could rule you. So while the white man left and the brown man took over, he said, well, heck, this is a damn comfortable thing to be in. Why should we change it? So he's still carrying on with it. And this cannot carry on. I mean, how long will you live in the hegemony of your own servants? You cannot, you should not. And they are not the people to whom we need to make an appeal. They will not change anything because they are the principal beneficiaries of all the perks. So when you want to establish equity, you have to first address the law. There is a fundamental change in the penal code, the civil penal code and the criminal penal code in this country that has to take place, which is supposed to be done again by the legislative assemblies. And the legislative assemblies again are based on a feudal mindset. They're getting perks. Take the example of Scandinavia. Their parliamentarians or the people who are in the legislature, they don't get paid. They're not getting paid anything. They spend from their pocket. They are required to come in public transport and they are supposed to make laws. So because they are feeling the pangs of the problems the public is suffering, they are making good laws. Here we have taken the legislators as demigods. You have to go stand in a queue and you have to salute the Sahab. He's not no Sahab. He's on your payroll. He's getting paid from your taxes. He better be responsive, and if he's not responsive, he should be sacked and somebody else should take his place. Equity will come when there's an even playing field and there are laws which are applicable across the board. There are institutions protecting their people after they commit a crime. Take the army, right, as one example. Take the Security and Exchanges Commission of this country. They will protect criminals so that the institution, and that's their logic they present, that the institution will get a bad name. The institution does not get a bad name. The institution gets a good name that they weed out the corrupt. When I see a board on the road say no to corruption, it is hilarious. Corruption is not with the people. Corruption is with 2.6 million people who are sitting as the ruling elite in this country. These are the 2.6 million people. They have to be there on the basis of merit and job descriptions. You do your job, you get paid for it. You don't do your job, from among 220 million people, there are many who can do a better job. They should take over. This is where the mafias are. This is where the rot in governance is. This is what we want changed. That's where the equity comes in.
Yes. Sir Agha, while going through your concept of urbanization, I came across this opinion of yours where you have mentioned that the agriculture should be governed under corporate controls. There are a couple of things where what I believe here is you have mentioned this across several industries, tourism, mining, and then agriculture. I can see this implementation can be done on tourism and mining, but when you talk about agriculture, there are various necessities, various products that are a necessity item of everyday customers. Now, when you see agriculture transforming under corporate control, so let's talk about the dairy products. When you see certain organizations like Angro, Milpac, there cannot, I believe that there cannot be corporate controls in the pricing, because every other organization, they charge a separate amount of money for 1 liter of milk. But on the other hand, the open market, they have a set price barriers. So how would what would you suggest that how can there can be corporate controls? Because currently there are no controls on packaged milk, which is again a necessity item and comes under agriculture.
I think you put two questions here. Number one, the corporate formula for managing production is one, and the other is the price differential between a product which is sold openly and the product which is sold in packages. To answer your first question, I find that in a country where a history or a legacy of feudalism has existed, land reforms have become near impossible. It has been tried. Even Bhutto tried it and brought it down to 400 acres and so on and so forth. They are not effective. People like the Jatois, one of the largest landowners in Sindh, 36,000 acres or plus, have property in the name of their employees, their haris, so forth. We want to take lies out of the system. If you are a Jatoi and you want to have 36,000 acres of land, please go ahead, have it. Have 40,000 acres of land. But it has to be a corporate. If I own a bank, if I own an insurance company, if I own a textile mill, and it is a public limited company, I am responsible for reporting to the regulators. In Pakistan, the productivity level has been way below the international level. That means if I have a plot of land which can produce 100 as an index, point, I am doing less than 56. So once you put it under a corporate umbrella, then the owner or the operators of that plot of land will have to meet international levels of production, give or take 5–10%. So the productivity in the country will go up. That is true for mining concessions. That is true for industrial estates. That is true for agriculture. Then the taxation barrier of agriculture in this country is near zero. You have land and there is no tax on it. I mean, tax, if there is tax, it is so little that it is insignificant. So what is happening is that there is, socially, you are destroying the ability of enterprise in the field of agriculture. Pakistan is predominantly an agricultural country. If you take the food map of the world, you will see countries as small as Denmark in Europe exporting food to Pakistan while it should have been the other way around. You're talking about milk? Sure. We need milk. Our poor are not getting milk. And the little milk we are producing gets contaminated. And then it is, yes, open and packed both, but the price differential is there because of the packaging. Now, everywhere in the world, you don't have deputy commissioners like you had in the colonial period, or you don't have policemen telling a shopkeeper at what price he should be selling his milk or should be selling his groceries. What regulates prices is competition. If you're selling milk and he's selling milk, and both of you are selling milk on the basis of the specification the milk is carrying, and you're selling it in the same packaging, you will always try and compete with your competitor. So the price stability will not be a knife in the back of the population. You have a competition authority of Pakistan. Now that competition authority of Pakistan is being used as a political tool against entrepreneurs. It's ridiculous. Today you've had sugar crisis in the country. You've had wheat crisis in the country. Why do you think they're there? There's the public sector, like the CDC, CD, whatever that utility stores corporation and the whatever CD corporation or whatever belonging to the army. They are marketing food products. There are people in the private sector marketing food products. The profitability levels are varying. And then you have the civil bureaucracy coming and telling them how to price the product. They are nobody to tell you. I manufacture this. I want to sell it for $1 million. I'm at liberty to sell it at $1 million if I can find a buyer. So competition is not being allowed the fair rein it ought to get to be able to keep price at a stable level. That's my opinion on this.
There's one more question. Recently, during this pandemic, we came across this SARS program. So I believe that in Pakistan, we lack processes, we lack the implementation and execution. But I see that this SARS program, the spending was 144 million, and the per salary amount was 12,000, which was distributed to per family. Now, what I see is, there were a lot of people who were saying that there was disruption in the spending. Some spending was already kept in the pockets of the one who has to distribute this amount of money. And I don't see that there was any process which was where we could account for a fair and proper distribution, or a channel where we could calculate that this was a deserving person and he got the 12,000 amount which he actually deserved. So the process was missing. So what could be done to uh, make a proper process for these kind of situations? And there are various other programs as well, which are government based, but there are uh, a lot of problems where we can see that the proper distribution or proper fairness is not attained.
You strengthen my concept of urbanization. You see, if you had a population of 60,000 people per urban unit, there would be people who would be categorized as infants, as people who are students, people who are not students but are ready for labor or can labor with it because they are in that age bracket. And then you have the old and feeble who are unable to labor. 2 days ago, 3 days ago, Turkey announced that everybody above the age of 65 is going to get X amount of money, irrespective of gender, irrespective of their relationship, whether they are married, not married, they are a family unit or not. Above 65, you get this much. Where do you get it? Not through politicians. You get it through the bank. So you create fiscal autarky. Here, land is being distributed by your servants. The Prime Minister is coming, or the Minister is coming, or the Governor is coming and distributing land. It doesn't belong to him. They are distributing money. It doesn't belong to you. It is a taxpayer's money. And if you can't give us a regime, then you are not supposed to be distributing it to begin with. They are doing it more with a political objective ahead of them instead of realism, where the deserving need to get what they need. So much of money, according to the government of Sindh, was given out to the people who were hungry or without a job during the course of this pandemic. Where is the audit? So much of money was given by the federal government. Where is the audit? You may have also read in the book about a social contract, that in a social contract, which I have proposed, the job has to be done by the servants of the country, i.e. the bureaucracy. The audit has to be done by the people. Transparency. Transparency is absent. So the complaint which you, or the point which you are making or trying to make here of an aspect which is grey, we don't know whether they have done, somebody has pocketed the money or not. But it is so assumed. Even if the money has not been pocketed, it is so assumed because there is the lack of transparency. There is a lack of that audit. It is a taxpayer's money which is being distributed. A taxpayer needs to know where his money went, and he's only comfortable knowing that when there is independent audit.
You just mentioned that politics cannot be personality based. But over here in Pakistan, we see that the name of the party, it's on the one end, but the parties belong to certain personalities and people vote because of that personality. I'm not going to vote for PTA just because of the name of the PTA. I see Imran Khan leading the party, and a lot of people, they vote for Imran Khan, and ultimately they end up voting for PTA. Same is the case in PMLN and PPP. Now again, these parties, they do not show their manifesto, they have no agenda. The only slogan which I remember years back, which was Roti Kapra Makan, they are still, the PPP is still working on the same basis. World is evolving every day. So there are two questions. Firstly, why does parties do not show their manifesto, their agenda, which is never open to the public? Firstly. Number two, the question about personality-based politics. We even see in USA there is Republicans versus Democrats. Over here in Pakistan, this is not the case. How much time will it take that a general audience, layman who has to vote, he will vote for the manifesto of the name of the party, not in the name of the personality.
In addition to what he has already said, there is a politics of electables, and then there is a visionary politics. So clearly, people voting for Sai and Sayyids and the Hashmis, etc., because he would be beneficial to us spiritually, is on, or for whatever reason, the mental slavery of it bars us from voting for the right candidate in the terms that you're devising. I'm a bit of under mental discomfort, quite honestly, after the discussion, because it is, we all know that there is a daylight of gap in all of these things that exist within Pakistan. The whole point is that what is the system of governance that would enable us to reach at the point where we can actually implement them, even if we have a consensus? Like, for example, clearly, democratically, if we see how things are engineered within Pakistan, so is it fueled by a different political ideology that is going to get someone at the top who would call these shots, and then things will be implemented? Or are we waiting for 100, 200 more years after urbanization, the consensus has been built? Because, the youngster population at least is quite hasty in terms of they want to see a change within their own lifetimes. So what do we need to understand out of these policies, keeping in mind the entire contextual specifics, as to when can we see the mobilization of these things being implemented? Is it through this political system? Or if we are breaking it down, how are we breaking it down? And how does that other political system, whichever it's going to take over the present one, so that we can see these policies being mobilized?
What I meant by the word manifesto or agenda was there was nothing, no proper vision when CPAC was signed. The idea or the vision after 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, this was never showed to the population, to the people who have something in mind, or the people living in Gawadar. Secondly, the current dam fund. Currently, the project is postponed. There's a halt. Things are going on, but nothing is there clearly visible on media or on paper, and we do not know. This is our money. We have spent the money in the building of a dam, which is our basic necessity of water. And we do know that if this dam is not built, and in the near future, we might be deprived of water. So my clear ideology was that are we not properly exposed to what is their vision after 10 years, 20 years, 50 years? We are never, if I'm going there to vote for a person and I know that he has done something in past, I have this thing in my mind that there is a credibility. But this way, my credibility is lost somewhere.
I'll try and compartmentalize my answers to several things which your questions have brought to the table. Let's take political manifestos to begin with. Political manifestos usually, or by international law, have to be an articulated document which are supposed to be filed with an election commission, and the achievement which have been articulated in that document become the fundamental basis on which you pre-qualify for elections the next time around. That is absent here. So the election commission obviously is not doing its job. Political manifestos are based on the personality or the families that are supposed to be governing us, which is what urbanization will completely destroy. Urbanization with the factor of dole, that means if you fiscally empower the people, the same families, the same personality will cut no ice. Today, you have captive political constituencies in this country. The electables that you talk about are there because they have captive population in their control. If I am a Vadera in Sindh, or I am a Sardar in Balochistan, or I am a Malik somewhere, and a Chaudhary somewhere else, I have a number of people who are under my control. And I can terrorize them if they don't vote for me. Urbanization will kill this. Number one. Number two, you have another issue on the basis of implementing a manifesto. A manifesto has to have two clear aspects to it. Number one, social benefits. Number two, economic benefits for the population, not for strengthening the party, for the population. What will you deliver? Articulate it on both counts. And like any other regulator for a company, for instance, or a regulator for any set of activity, the Election Commission is supposed to take count of this. Have you managed to cross so and so milestones? And if you haven't crossed even 30% of what you had committed, you don't qualify for elections in the next time around. You're done and over with as a political force. That does not happen here, because the concept of democracy which this country has purchased from the donors is a self-acquired form of subservience and slavery that we have taken over. Is that you must have, in a bicameral legislature, you must have a prime minister and you must have a president in a cage who has got no powers. That is the thing they want. And while you have this facade, the chief of the army staff will be running the country. So, wasting our time even thinking about their model is not acceptable. So when you revert to your ideology, which is what my focus has been in presenting to you the urbanization model, or the model for land management, or the model for your economic planning through urbanization, has been that you follow the Islamic model. The Islamic model is very clear, both in the Quran and by consensus in all sects of Islam, and which is that the judiciary is supposed to be the strongest element in society, and their job is not to run the country, is to adjudicate between the governors and the governed. Today, your judiciary is still under the executive. There is a Ministry of Law, there is a Secretary of Law, there is a Minister for Law who decides which judge is going to get posted where, if he is going to get an increment in his salaries. And so you are still under the executive. How can that man whose posting and his salaries are going to be determined by the executive adjudicate against the executive when I, as a commoner, have to go to the court and say that, all right, so-and-so bureaucrat or so-and-so politician or so-and-so secretary or so-and-so general of the army or so-and-so judge for that matter has been biased. So, you see, it has been a human failing that economic vibrance has brought about the arrogance and has brought about the strength and courage in a population to rebel against any order. So, in the urbanization model, you will see that fiscal decentralization and the fiscal empowerment of the population are fundamental goals to achieve. Once you achieve that, the efficacy of these institutions will take a 360-degree turn from being rulers to being servants. And that is what is required. The fundamental change in your constitution is to define the status of the governors and the governed.
Shahnawaz, I just wanted to ask that as you said, that this model of urbanization is unprecedented. So, how exactly? I mean, what what in your mind? What is in your mind? What is the plan like? I mean, with regards to its implementation and realization of this whole thing, that the concept of urbanization in actual terms would be like, if you see, uh, there are a lot of things in this world. There is this process of evolution with regards to everything. There is nothing such as what do you call it? A hasty change in anything, like from a thing going from 1 to 100 or 1 to 80. So, how um elaborate would how complex would be the process towards this urbanization?
Well, urbanization, to begin with, is not unprecedented. It is the thing in all the developed economies of the world. For the Pakistan region, it will be unprecedented because what they are referring to as urbanization is not what I'm referring to as urbanization, and I think I cleared this right at the outset. I'm talking about creating municipal companies here. That means putting a population of about 60,000 people into a municipal company environment which is got fiscal independence and provides all the vertical benefits to the residents there who pay a tax to live there. So, invoking this, yes, it will be opposed by the people who defend the current status quo, but then the current government has established an organization called the Naya Pakistan Housing and Development Authority, and they wanted to make houses for the poor, and that again is a degradatory concept because we are all poor. Make houses for everybody. Where are the poor? If they are talking of people outside the 2.6 million people who are running this country, then everybody else is poor, irrespective, because we are all oppressed. And if they are talking of making houses on the basis of political giveaways, it's a different ballgame. We need to plan cities and integrate populations within them, and because they get standards, there is a standards uplift. And I gave you an example earlier this evening on buying a suit. So, if you have an upgrade in your standards, that would enable people to buy the concept almost instantly. I live in this house, or I live in a hotel room, and if at the same cost of living I get a better accommodation, I will not waste a minute. I will make the shift. That is true for everybody in the country. It is what you are being able to offer. And what we have offered to the government already in succession for the last couple of decades has just been this. Why we are doing all this exercise is because we are not being heard. We need to be heard. We want to offer, through urbanization, better living conditions in this country, not for the people who are working for the government, for the people who are us, the population. And unless you give them that opportunity, that upgrade, obviously you can't sell the project. You can't sell the concept, you can't sell an idea. So the reason why we are discussing this threadbare is to be able to make it open, make it plain, make it clear, and perhaps even articulate it in fiscal terms as to how it will benefit the people. The servants will be managed subsequently.
My last question pertinent to your proposal of basically urbanizing the whole economy would be that one of the preeminent features of your proposal seem to be generating revenue solely from the production or from land, basically, in a nutshell. In a country where 80% of our GDP is being churned out by the industrial sector, what is the alchemy or the mechanism or the metamorphosis that you would propose to, for us to be able to achieve that, to achieve urbanization solely from the revenue generated by land?
The story of Pakistan is that whatever your industrial sector has been producing or is producing currently is on a decline. On the index of 100, the production factor has dropped down to 30 because the bureaucracy has made it almost impossible for entrepreneurs and industrialists to survive. I'm talking about the honest entrepreneurs and the honest industrialists to survive in this economy. Yes, 80% is being produced by them, but that in 80% is inadequate to meet your bill to sustain the country or sustain the country's population at any humanly acceptable level for survival, for sustenance, for subsistence, for instance. You don't have 70% of the population is without potable water. You don't have proper housing. You don't have proper sewerage. You don't have proper schooling. You don't have proper roads. I mean, look at the condition of the city of Karachi, for instance, today. So that 80% which you refer to as being produced by industrialists is inadequate. We need an injection of 10 times that amount. And if we need 10 times that amount, we need absolute open policies for investment and enterprise in this country. The bureaucracy is the biggest impediment. I want to put up an industry here. I want land. I need to go to somebody, first to a politician and then to a bureaucrat, and then I have to pay them to be able to get a land. Then I need to go again to the bureaucracy to get a permission. Can I put up a unit here to manufacture glasses? Well, think about it. No. Enterprise in all its formats and presentation, even if you want to manufacture atom bombs, he should have the liberty to do so. I'm not going to be dependent on a servant to tell me, who has no knowledge about the industry, whether I can put it up or I should not put it up. If I'm putting up my money for the industry, I am taking the risk. Who the hell is the bureaucrat to tell me whether I can or I cannot? And that is been the problem here. And the bureaucrat will only say something or will give you the permission after he has consulted his bosses. And his bosses, unfortunately, are donors. So you are not exactly independent. You are still colonized. And that is something which should not be acceptable to anybody who says, La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah. I mean, for God's sake, you've got to be dependent on your own hands, your own intellect, your own labor. Why should I be dependent on somebody who's already got a begging bowl? Look at this country. You get to see in the newspaper that the population needs to be complimented on the fact that our reserves have increased from 15 billion to 15.2 billion. Where are their reserves? Oh, they are in form of printed paper called the US dollar sitting in some bank in the US. Well, tomorrow I want to use all the $15 billion to convert it into gold. They'll say, no, you can't do it. So where is your independence? And tomorrow, if the dollar collapses, which is something which you can see on the internet even today, it's a projection. where do we go? If that reserve gets wiped out, what do you do? So we have to look within. We have to ascetize what are our natural resources, our human resources, and be reliant on that. We cannot absolutely under any circumstances be reliant upon the current model for political structuring, for economic structuring, or whatever the hell we are doing with the country.
Assalamu alaikum. I just want to go back on the discussion you had with Shahrukh, in which you discussed the production of milk, let's say, for example. So milk is a product that, let's say, for example, I will be selling out to the 60,000 people, the unit that I live in, correct? But what authority or what body regulates me or restricts me from trying to unionize that product and trying to drive that price up? Do you understand what my question is?
Yes.
So for example, if out of the 60,000 people, I pick up the 10 suppliers of milk, and we drive up the price of milk from, let's say, 50 rupees per kilo per liter to, let's say, and we standardize that to 150 rupees or 200 rupees, which is more than the rest of the units are probably proposing. What restricts me or regulates me, because ultimately the government is my servant, right? They're supposed to listen to what I have to say, and they can't restrict me from taking action in terms of what money I'm trying to generate, the revenue I'm trying to generate.
You see, product, when you have a competitive environment and you have the open liberty to replace your product, I am your consumer. I am a consumer front. I'm heading the consumers, the milk consumers in the city you're talking about of 60,000. You are a producer, and you have two other producers in the same region producing milk, and you collude with them and you say, all right, let's hike up the prices from, say, 10 rupees to 100 rupees. So we, the 60,000 who are consumers, will suffer, and you will make more profit. Now, how does openness of the law control that? If I am a consumer, I will stop buying from you. I'll go to the next city and buy it from there. But if I am restrained from importing, buying from anywhere else, then I'm your hostage, I'm your captive. That's what I said, opening up of the market for entrepreneurship, for competition, like in Karachi. You have 20 million people out here, or more perhaps. You have one supplier for electricity. Hypothetically, if there were 18, 20 suppliers, there would have been competition, there would have been price cuts, and there would have been better service. You take the Australian model, you go and rent a house and they tell you, all right, there are 10 companies approaching you, please buy electricity from us. You don't have that. So if you've taken away, because from the political perspective, the people who have got themselves entrenched and they have managed to put their own bureaucracy into office, they have tried to control all liberties that you can't squeak without their permission. We don't need their permission. You don't need permission of your servants. You are supposed to tell them what you, and they're supposed to serve your liberties. They're supposed to protect your liberties. So when you talk of the urbanization model, that's the core activity. And that in a fish-borne infrastructure which I have presented to all of you, you will see that the head of the fish is the unique selling point, which is based on your ideology. Your ideology gives you liberty. That's one of the fundamental aspects of your ideology. You must have the liberty to exercise your will. And if that is being controlled by your servants, then it's not part of your ideology.
Thank you for watching. Click the videos on screen to watch more. and make sure to subscribe for upcoming videos. Let the winds of change blow